So in this video, we're going to talk about Mel Stuart's 1971 film Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, starring Gene Wilder as Willy Wonka. Now this is obviously an adaptation of Roald Dahl's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, although apparently Roald Dahl hated this version. He detested it. He thought it did a terrible job representing his book. But that's not what I'm particularly interested in with this film. What struck me this time while I was rewatching this movie is the economics of it. Now, some of these are just sort of like you have to just let it go and let it be what it is for the fantasy of the movie to play out. But some of these things are worth thinking about. The economics and the financial and logistical aspects of this film. Starting actually from essentially the first scene, right? Because in the first scene, where you have that famous song made famous by, I think, Sammy Davis Jr., who made the song The Candyman a hit, you've got this candy store owner who's just giving away his inventory. I mean, he's like distributing candy to children by the handful. He is not keeping track of who's getting what. At one point, he's just like, yes, I'll lift up the bar counter thing and let the children just come back and start taking candy at their leisure. He is not in any sense keeping track of who's taking what. He's not writing it down. He's not charging people. Kids are just like pulling those like shitty lines of paper with little like daubs of colored sugar stuff on them. They're just like pulling that down by the foot. They're taking everything. And this guy's just like, whatevs, I'm gonna have my own fucking piece of candy because I'm singing a delightful, cheery tune, and apparently that means I don't have to charge anyone or collect any money in exchange for my inventory. Now, the only way that I could possibly think of to explain this is that this guy is taking, like, the drug dealer approach, where, like, you give them the first one free, and then they're hooked and they want to come back and get more. But clearly that's not what's going on here, because he knows several of these children, because when they come in, he's like, you want X thing, you want this thing over here. I know your orders because you have come into my candy store before. So the idea that he's even like trying to tempt them to come back and then pay for stuff in the future doesn't really make any sense. But the other part about this scene that doesn't make any sense is at the window, at the end of this scene, you got Charlie Bucket, the poor kid, just staring in, longing for some free candy. It's like, dude, if you ever wanted candy, right now is clearly the time to go get it. This guy is not keeping track. You could have anything that you want. He is not going to charge you. You could just go in, get a handful of stuff, and walk out with it. He's not stopping you. Like, being poor is no objection when the candy is being given away for free. So we've got that weird bit of it, and that, I think, the fact that that's the first scene, and it's so blatantly about financial irresponsibility, to me, sort of hints that that's important in this film. Now, I want to talk about the Bucket family a little bit, because they're also in kind of a weird financial situation. So they're supposed to be extraordinarily poor, and that's fine. There are poor people. There's nothing wrong with being poor, and the thing is, the thing in this case is that how poor they are doesn't, to me, make that much sense. These are people who are living in a ramshackle, run-down hut, basically, at the edge of town. They're living off of cabbage soup, to the point where when Charlie brings home a loaf of bread from his first pay delivering newspapers, they're like, "This is a feast! Oh, how glorious it's going to be to have bread rather than just this fucking terrible cabbage soup that we hate." This is a family. The mother's working. She's in laundry, something like this. We see her at work. Probably not making great wages. I accept that. Nothing wrong with that. She should be paid better. In that sense, there is something wrong with this. Fuck the owners of that laundry. She should be paid a living wage, as should we all. But Charlie, doing his paper route, seems to be making at least as much as she is. So that's a weird component of it. But here's the thing that really bothers me about it. This is a household in this version. No father. We get the sense that the father has died, though that doesn't play that big a role in the film. 4 senior citizens. Grandpa George, Grandpa Georgina, Grandpa Joe, Grandpa Josephine. Weird that they've married people with the alternate gendered versions of their name, but there you go. They have remained confined to a bed for the past 20 years. So this is 4 senior citizens with disabilities. You have a single mother with a child. This is 1971 that this film it comes out. Late 60s into the early 70s. This version is clearly set in the US. Roald Dahl's version, I think, is set in the UK. Doesn't matter, because either the US or the UK, there was public assistance available for people in this situation. If you have 4 senior citizens in the US, that should be 4 Social Security checks coming in. If you have people in the home with disabilities, that should be 4 sets of disability checks coming in. If you have a single mother with a child, that should be WIC benefits or SNAP benefits or whatever it was in 1971. They changed the various programs periodically. But just the fact that this family is like, we are choosing to live, and I think it has to be choosing. I mean, I don't want to victim blame them for being poor, and that's not at all what I'm trying to say here. But there is public money available through Social Security, through disability assistance, through SNAP, WIC, child support programs. This family should be able to get some sort of public funding to make their lives a little more comfortable. They should be able to afford bread on occasion. And I get that the whole point of them being super, super poor is so that when Charlie does find the golden ticket and gets to go to Wonka's chocolate factory, it's super, super exciting, and it's, whatever, this miraculous thing. But still, there are ways that they could live a more comfortable life, and I can't see how they would be turned down for things like Social Security, disability, SNAP or WIC benefits, etc., etc. So, I don't know. That bothers me, because I feel like, especially in the 60s and 70s, public funds were much more readily available in both the US and the UK than they necessarily are today in 2022. So that's a component of it. But then, Willy Wonka, the mysterious chocolatier with his top hat and cane. And, I mean, this is a corduroy sport coat. I don't have a purple velvet frock coat, which is a little bit sad. But there you go. Willy Wonka, the mysterious chocolatier, beloved of all the world, even though he's a weird recluse who just lives in his factory continually, decides that he's going to send out 5 golden tickets to allow 5 lucky children to come into his factory. Not clear how he knows it's going to be children who find the golden tickets, since adults also eat candy. But, you know, there we go. We'll come back to that as well. And so the children who come in, you've got Augustus Kloop, who is continually eating. He's this sort of figure of heinous gluttony. You've got Veruca Salt, who is incredibly spoiled and just demands that her every whim be catered to at every moment by her father, who is just basically like, yeah, that sounds great. You've got Violet Beauregard, who is just really into gum chewing. Like she's chewed a piece of gum for 3 months. So, you know. And then you've got Mike TV, who's really into TV, making his last name super appropriate, ironically appropriate, some might say. And then you've got Charlie Bucket, who's super poor and has no major vices. Because apparently chewing gum a lot and watching TV are vices in this world. We'll talk about that as well. So they all get invited to this factory. They all win golden tickets. They all get invited. The factory had closed at one point because industrial spies were stealing Willy Wonka's chocolate-making secrets. Then 3 years later, according to Grandpa Joe, it reopened. Nobody knew who was working there, how the factory was running, etc., etc. This I have another problem with. That's not how factories work. So this factory clearly had to be retrofitted because there are doors that are, we find out when we get in there that it's run by Oompa Loompas, or the laborers are Oompa Loompas. It's run by a human. But like the door, a lot of the doors are Oompa Loompa sized rather than human sized. It's a crazy fucking nonsensical industrial fantasy land. This is not a factory that could be functionally run by human beings. Plus, if the whole point was, I want people to stop stealing my candy-making secrets, you can't just be like, I've got this crazy fucking room where every plant and giant mushroom and there's gummy bears on the trees and everything is edible and there's a chocolate river. Like, you can't just keep that going once you've fired everybody for industrial espionage. If you just keep it going with your crazy factory doing the same crazy stuff, you haven't really achieved your goal. So we've got that component of it. This is a factory that must have been retrofitted for the Oompa Loompas. But no one ever goes in, no one ever comes out. That's the line on Wonka's factory. It's a complete mystery how things run in there. Which means no one from the government has been in to check whether this building is up to code. No one is in there from OSHA making sure that working conditions are safe, which, by the way, they do not appear to be. Nobody is in there making sure that the Oompa Loompas are being paid at least minimum wage, and it's not clear that they are. I mean, Wonka has, in secret, transported the entire population of this species, race. It's not clear exactly what sort of biological subdivision the Oompa Loompas even are, but he has transported them all to his factory. Probably they're getting room and board as part of their salary, but it's not clear what, if anything, they're getting paid beyond that. In the 2005 Tim Burton version, this is actually discussed. Willy Wonka has gone to Loompa Land looking for flavors, and he finds the Oompa Loompas, and they're like, we love fucking cocoa beans. We're nuts on them. And Willy Wonka's like, I will pay you in cocoa beans if you want to come work in my factory. That is not minimum wage. He is not complying with the laws regarding fair pay for labor. So that's a big problem. This is a completely illegal factory, totally violating a number of regulations. Huge problems here. So we've got all that going on. Once you're in the factory, and there's a huge problem as well with the factory in the sense that I can't even imagine how much money it would cost to build and maintain a factory that consistently denies multitudinous laws of physics. It must be incredibly expensive. But we also know that Willy Wonka has money. We don't know where his money came from, but we know that he has money. In part because his chocolate sales are so good. And actually, this is one thing that I do appreciate about the movie from an economic perspective. When the contest is first announced, the 5 golden tickets contest, Grandpa Joe does remark he'll sell 1 million chocolate bars. Probably more. Well more than 1 million. But that's the thing. It's an incredible marketing ploy. Like, if I were Willy Wonka and I were going to do the golden tickets thing, I would say there's 5 golden tickets, but I would only ever send out 4. People can keep buying them. Now, I probably wouldn't do that because I'm not an evil capitalist bloodsucker. You know who you are. But you've got that component of it. Like that, the marketing element of this golden ticket scheme is actually mentioned in a way that it isn't in the 2005 version. So that's, I think, a good thing. But once you're in the factory, you start to get into sort of the morals or the ethical lessons of the film. And this is where things get especially complicated because the morality is contradictory. Because the big thing with the 4 kids other than Charlie is they each have some kind of greedy vice or some sort of selfishness, right? Augustus is a glutton. Veruca is avaricious. Big drop off from those two to choose gum all the time, but it's apparently a bad thing, even though this is a candy factory. But so each of these 4 kids has some sort of vice, and after they are hubristically done in by their vices, the Oompa Loompas sing delightful little songs about those vices suck. And how basically you should be moderate in your desires and your appetites, which is excellent advice. The Oompa Loompas, spot on. I'm right there with you guys. The problem becomes that Willy Wonka's whole shtick is whatever you want to do it. Imagine, go forth, be free. Whatever you can imagine, you can do. The laws of physics will not even prevent you from doing the things that you want to do if you're Willy Wonka. So his whole ethos is of unbridled excess. And yet, the film is a critique of the children who engage in unbridled excess. The obscene enjoyment of a character like Augustus or like Mike TV is replicated in the obscene enjoyment of a character like Willy Wonka. And the film doesn't resolve that tension. It makes no attempt to resolve that tension. In fact, at the very end, Wonka's final sort of piece of wisdom for Charlie is, remember what happened to the man who suddenly got everything he ever wanted. He lived happily ever after. So the idea, like, how can that be the phrase that wraps up a movie that has said Augustus Kloop is bad because he is gluttonous and he indulges his appetite? Veruca Salt is bad because she is avaricious and greedy and she indulges those appetites. How can the conclusion of the film be the person who gets everything they ever want is happy, and that happiness is a good thing? Like, it doesn't make sense. It's a contradiction at the very heart of the film, that the film doesn't, in any sense, attempt to work through or make sense of or even acknowledge. In some ways, it's the contradiction at the heart of capitalism, isn't it? Because capitalism, consumer economy, requires that we continually indulge, we continually consume, we continually buy more and more and more products. And yet, in order for that economy to work, it also depends on the vast majority of us to renounce opportunities for actual happiness. We have to renounce our desire to eat more, our desire to have things that we haven't earned, whatever it is. We have to renounce our antisocial desires, and what in this case counts as an antisocial desire is really sort of determined by the needs of the capitalist system. We have to go to work, often at jobs we don't especially enjoy, or jobs that we don't enjoy entirely, whatever it is. I mean, many people, if given the choice, if the stated goal was do the thing that makes you happy, many people would not be doing the jobs that they're doing. And capitalism is aware of that. It's indifferent to that as a problem, or it doesn't even see it as a problem, because capitalism requires that we renounce our desires, that we renounce the things that would make us happy in order to work for the capitalist system. This is what capitalism is about. The tension between, on the one hand, being told to consume and that consumption will make us happy, and on the other hand, being told, renounce your desires to fulfill your role within the capitalist system. Do what capitalism requires of you, which is simultaneously to buy and consume, and to renounce actual enjoyment in favor of labor that you do not get to enjoy the full rewards of, or the full profits of. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is an ultra-capitalist film.